You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, we are trying a true remote. I hope this is going well for everybody. We're not going to be able to take questions this time, but we're going to work on it because we do have the voice of God producing this back home. And just I have a small telephone screen that I'm going off of that makes it a little bit difficult. The first practice of the Under Armour All-American game is kind of over. And, you know, there's some certain things that everybody should just be excited about. First of all, Deuce Geralds is the guy that stood out in day one. Deuce Geralds is a 2026 out of Georgia. He has an offer from absolutely everybody except the Georgia Bulldogs, surprisingly enough. And honestly, if he was 6'4", he would probably be the number one player in the country. He is unbelievably smooth moving. And I talked to national analysts all over the place, and it's like they would not be surprised at all if he won the MVP of this game. And I was like, really? It's like, yeah. And, you know, we talked is like, you know, you don't necessarily need that height because you have like Aaron Donald. I'm not comparing him to Aaron Donald, but you can be 5'11" and be a dominant defensive lineman. And Devin Geralds Jr., Deuce Geralds, he has everything you would need. And of course, I feel old as heck because his dad was on Ole Miss's football team whenever I was on staff. And so nothing quite makes you feel as old as that. But Deuce Geralds is a really good football player. Got to see a little Keon Young. Had a little bit of nerves in day one. I think he's going to be fine. They're working him predominantly at free safety. So what's going on with him, we'll see how he develops over the next couple of days before he gets to Oxford on January 21st. That's when he's coming to Oxford. Cortez Thomas, saw him a little bit as well. Just a natural football player. That's what, in the same way that Suntarine Perkins was. Cortez Thomas is a football player in that vein. He was working, it looked like, with the starters on defense, but it was kind of hard to tell because it was day one all-star practice. But he was already taking charge of the other DBs in the secondary, which means that him talking about having a high football IQ and that being a strength of his game was actually a real deal thing. Tristen Keys, saw him. Really nice catch he made during the 7-on-7 period. It was a difficult catch that he just made routine, and that definitely stood out to me as well. Those were the main players from this game. Like I said, Deuce Geralds, if he was 4 inches taller, he'd be the number one player in America. He looks absolutely like a number one type football player. And there's not a lot to say about that. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about before we get out of here tonight is Ole Miss has been putting videos on their website, getting ready during practice for the Gator Bowl. And one of them was Jackson Dart throwing a pass, but the guy that he play action passed to was Logan Diggs. You got to see a clear number 22 line up with Jackson Dart. And we've talked about that game, and we're going to talk about that game for several days leading up to it on January 2nd. And we'll see exactly how it goes there. Again, Under Armour day one, there's a lot of dudes. They're kind of still working out the kinks a little bit. They're not doing as much contact as you would like. I talked with John Garcia and Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, and they was like, hey, all of these things where you talk about these standouts in day one, you need to find a linebacker, but how do you find a linebacker? Because this environment is just not set for linebackers. And there's not really a whole lot you can do about that. Linebackers, I'm sure, are really good, but they're just not set up. They did a little bit of inside run, but there was no real hitting for inside run. They did 7-on-7. There's no real hitting. The linebackers are at such a disadvantage in this game, especially during the early part of the game, to where when the game actually kicks off is probably going to be the first time that a linebacker stands out to somebody, honestly. Again, there's a defensive lineman out of Picayune. I did not notice him. If something pops with him, you know, I would talk about it as well. But the Mississippi contingent at this game played pretty well. They did what you hoped that they would do, and especially the Ole Miss signings, the Keon Youngs, the Cortez Thomas. Cortez Thomas genuinely looked like a natural athlete out there. And, I mean, that's all you'd ask. Like Sunshine Perkins, similar, just a football player. So we'll see exactly how it goes. But this was my first test. I'm sorry it's so short, but this is my first test at doing one of these true remotes. Hope everybody has a good day. Tomorrow, we're going to talk a little bit about Ben Bell and a potential transfer visitor. Next week, we're going to talk about the Gator Bowl and some of the storylines going into that game. So we'll see exactly how it goes. Anyway, for the voice of God back in the studio, I'm Steven Willis. I hope you enjoyed this for what we can. We're going to do live remotes more often, and they're going to be longer, and they're going to be more complex now that we know we can do it. So I hope everybody has a good night. We'll talk to you later. Hotty toddy, everybody.